Is it fair when everyone in a family has different rights and responsibilities, different fears? He thought his accusation would put her in her place, but instead of tears and apologies, he heard a calm, calculated proposal that changed their lives forever. Enjoy listening. The sticky July heat seeping through the loosely closed balcony doors permeated everything in Anna's studio apartment. It mingled with the scent of old parquet flooring imbued with decades of other people's lives, with the dust dancing in the slanted sunbeam, and with the faint, almost imperceptible aroma of lavender and potpourri tucked away in her grandmother's dresser. This Karelian birch dresser, with its tarnished brass handles and a crack on the top board, was an anchor, holding her in a world full of anxieties and unspoken resentments. With a straight, tense back, Anna sat at her desk. Her fingers fluttered over the keyboard with mechanical precision. She was translating a complex technical regulation for a Swiss company. Tedious work demanding extreme concentration. But it was precisely this monotony that saved her from thoughts as sticky and stuffy as this July air. Numbers, formulas, blueprints. In their soulless logic, there was respite for her weary soul. In the reflection of the monitor, which briefly went dark, her face flickered, pale with shadows under her eyes, but with stubbornly pursed lips. 34 years old, of which the last 5 had felt like one endless, drawn-out day. From the room, partitioned off from her workspace by a heavy plush curtain, came a steady snuffling sound. There, on the sagging sofa, slept Tikhon, her husband. He slept as the righteous or infant sleep, serenely, arms outstretched, immersed in a world where there were no bills to pay and no need to worry about tomorrow. He called himself a freelance artist, a photographer searching for his angle in banality. For the last 3 years, his searches had yielded nothing but folders filled with thousands of identical shots of city sunsets and pigeons, and the occasional contemptuously tossed bill from rare wedding shoots, which he considered an insult to his talent. The entire household, the entire financial burden, rested on Anna's slender shoulders. This apartment, inherited from her grandmother, was both her curse and her sanctuary. Tikhon hated its bourgeois coziness, the old furniture, the faded floral wallpaper. He dreamed of selling everything, buying a studio with panoramic windows somewhere in a new development, and equipping it as a true creative laboratory. Anna, on the other hand, clung to every object, every scratch on the desk that brought back memories of her school days. This was her home, her fortress, into which she herself, by cruel irony of fate, had let the enemy. The phone on the edge of the table vibrated. Anna flinched, darting a fearful glance at the curtain. Her mother. She answered hastily, pressing the receiver to her ear and speaking in a whisper. "Daughter, hello? Am I disturbing you?" Her mother's voice, soft, guilty, smelling of the countryside apples and something else familiar and irretrievable, made Anna's heart clench. "No, Mommy, not at all. How are you?" "Oh, nothing much. I'm working a little. It's been raining here for 3 weeks, Anya. The roof on the veranda has really sprung a leak. I'm putting basins underneath. But don't you worry. I'll manage. I'll ask the men for help once it dries." Her mother never asked directly. She only described her troubles with a meek resignation that took Anna's breath away. She pictured her mother, small and dry in an old robe, shuffling with those basins across the dark veranda that smelled of dampness and wilting geraniums. She ended the conversation feeling 2 angry, helpless tears roll down her cheeks. 7,000. For her, this was a substantial sum, almost a week of painstaking work. She opened her banking app. Her fingers trembled. A grumble came from behind the curtain, and she hastily, as if committing a crime, made the transfer. A mixture of guilt and relief churned in her chest. This small act of care was a breath of fresh air in the stuffy cell of her life. She looked again at her reflection in the dark screen. Her gaze had hardened. A premonition of something inevitable, like a thunderstorm after a long spell of oppressive heat. hung in the air, mingling with the scent of lavender and dust. The electricity in the house built up from below, like static voltage on synthetic fabric. It crackled in small things, in casually dropped words, in the irritated clatter of a fork against a plate. Tikhon, waking up closer to noon, wandered around the apartment for a long time in a rumpled t-shirt, scrutinizing the corners like a guard inspecting a cell. Quote 6, he stated lazily, peering behind the curtain. His voice held neither interest nor approval, only a languid weariness. Quote 7. Anna didn't turn around. They pay. It's enough to live on, to live. He smirked. To exist, Anya. A gray, boring life in your grandmother's tomb. No flights of fancy, no light. I saw an ad yesterday. A 40-square-meter studio in Sky Park. Open plan. Can you imagine the light there? I could take such portraits. Anna silently saved the document and turned to him. Tikhon, we've discussed this. I'm not selling this apartment. Of course you won't. You'll never sell. He threw his hands up theatrically. Every speck of dust here is saturated with the spirit of your precious grandmother. And the fact that your husband, an artist, is suffocating in this mustiness, that doesn't matter. The important thing is your sentimental memories, pure egoism. He walked to the window, striking a pose with his hands clasped behind his back, the posture of an unrecognized genius he so loved. Anna looked at his hunched back and thought, when did that enthusiastic young man with burning eyes, who read Brodsky to her on the night streets and dreamed of photographing souls, not sunsets, disappear? Where did he go? Or was he never there at all, and it was just an elaborate facade behind which hid this capricious, lazy, and endlessly self-absorbed man? 2 days later, Tikhon's mother, Ariadna Pavlovna, called. He recognized her voice the moment her husband brought the receiver to his ear. High-pitched, melodious, with velvet, enveloping intonations that always made Anna feel uneasy. Tikhon listened, nodded, his face adopting the expression of a caring, loving son. Quote 14, hanging up, he walked over to Anna, who was demonstratively engrossed in her work. Quote 15, he began without preamble. Quote 16, Anna froze. 50,000. This was her safety net in case of illness or a lack of orders. Money she had saved bit by bit, denying herself everything. Quote 17, she said evenly, trying to keep her voice from trembling. Quote 18, he exclaimed. Quote 19, quote 20, she couldn't help but retort. Last time she urgently needed a new refrigerator because the old one was spoiling the aura of the food. The time before that, an air conditioner, because the air in her city was too dry for her delicate skin. You dare to reproach my mother? Tikhon's face contorted. Anna wanted to ask, but merely tightened her lips. The argument was pointless. He couldn't hear her. He only heard himself and the melodious voice of Ariadna Pavlovna. In the evening, as Anna was reheating dinner, yesterday's macaroni and cheese, Tikhon came up behind her and tried to embrace her. His hands felt alien, cold. Quote 24, he cooed into her ear. Quote 25. And he lied. He lied as easily as he breathed. Anna knew there would be no project. There would be new requests from Ariadna Pavlovna, new theatrical sufferings from Tikhon, and new holes in her budget. Quote 26, she replied dryly, freeing herself from his embrace. She couldn't sleep for a long time that night, listening to his steady breathing and feeling infinitely alone. Her mother's conversation surfaced in her memory, her guilty voice, the mention of the leaking roof, 7,000 for roofing versus 50,000 for a Swiss device. The arithmetic was so simple and so monstrous that Anna felt something snap inside her. The thin thread of patience upon which everything depended stretched to its limit and began to tremble, ready to break at any moment. The next day she worked with a fierce intensity, trying to drown out the internal hum. Tikhon was demonstratively gloomy. He didn't talk to her, slammed cupboard doors loudly, and sighed in a way that she would certainly hear. He was playing the role of the offended son whose sacred request had been ignored. All day she felt his heavy, scrutinizing gaze upon her. He was waiting for her to break, as she always had. In the evening, in the kitchen, he sat opposite her, a cold determination etched on his face. "So that's how it is," he hissed. "I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. Either you transfer the money to my mother now or what?" Anna asked quietly, looking him straight in the eye. He hadn't expected that tone. He was accustomed to her compliance, her tears, her quiet resignation. Quote 30. He stood up and left. She remained seated in the silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock. In this silence, one thought beat clearly. Quote 31. The tension reached its peak on the third day. He found out somehow, perhaps he spied on her or peeked at her phone while she was in the shower. He burst into her workspace, yanking the curtain so hard that the rings on the rod jingled. His face was crimson. In his hand, he held his smartphone, jabbing at it with his finger. Quote 32, he roared. On the screen, a line from a bank statement glowed. Quote 33. And Anna looked at him silently. There was no fear, only a cold, ringing emptiness inside. She replied calmly, and then he exploded. He trembled all over. Words flew out of him like corks from a champagne bottle, mixed with sprays of saliva. Quote 37. It was a hysteria, an unseemly male tantrum devoid of any dignity. Anna watched him detachedly, as if at an actor in a bad play. Quote 38, she said just as quietly. Quote 39. He frantically tapped his fingers on his phone screen. Quote 40. A moment, another, and with a triumphant, vengeful look, he turned the smartphone to her. Quote 41. He watched her, expecting tears, pleas, a scandal. He craved her reaction. He needed it like air to justify his own baseness. But Anna remained silent. She looked at him, and in her eyes something new slowly emerged, something he had never seen before. Not pain, not resentment, but a kind of terrible cold clarity. And she saw before her not a husband, not a loved one, but a stranger, pathetic and petty thief, who had stolen not just money, but her last illusions. She slowly stood up. Her composure frightened him more than any scream. Quote 42, she said, and her voice sounded strangely firm in the deafening silence of the room with a metallic echo. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. He blinked in confusion. His triumphant expression began to fade from his face. Quote 43, quote 44, he stammered. Quote 45, quote 46. She smiled faintly, but the smile was more terrifying than a grimace. Quote 47. She turned away, walked to the window, and flung it wide open. A gust of wind rushed into the room, smelling of dust, asphalt, and distant thunder. It brought with it not coolness, but a sense of change. Tikhon stood in the middle of the room, pathetic, confused, utterly destroyed by her icy calm. The shotgun, hanging on the wall for 5 years, had finally fired, and the bullet hit the bullseye. He left not in an hour, but in 3, after shouts, threats, and even attempts to cry. Anna, without uttering another word, sat silently in the armchair and stared out the window. Her silence proved more formidable than any accusations, a wall against which all his words shattered. When the door slammed shut behind him, the apartment became so quiet that Anna could hear her own heart beating. The tears had stopped. All that remained was a vast, ringing, empty space within and around her. November arrived with the first snow. Anna returned home, climbing the stairs of her old house. She unlocked the door and entered. The apartment greeted her with silence and a scent of cleanliness. She had learned to breathe in this silence, to find support in it. No more musty spirit, laziness, or tobacco. No more T-shirts piled in a corner. The light, Almost white walls that she and her mother had wallpapered at the end of summer made the room feel spacious and airy. Her mother had come then with jars of pickled cucumbers, saw her refreshed daughter, shoulders back, and asked nothing, only discreetly wiped away a tear, hugging her tighter than usual. In the mailbox lay an envelope, cheap paper, Ariadna Pavlovna's fancy handwriting. Anna's heart didn't even skip a beat. She opened it at home, standing in the middle of the room. The letter was full of exquisite complaints wrapped in false sympathy. Our dear Anya, our guardian angel, Tikhon, has really withered without you. A creative crisis, you understand. Such a sensitive boy. It's so hard for me to watch him. And my health, you know. And at the end, amidst the lacy words, a timid request. Couldn't you, out of old habit, send at least 1,000 or 2 for medicine? Tikhon can't right now. For her, Anna was still just a convenient resource that had somehow malfunctioned. A faint, bitter smile touched Anna's lips. No anger, no triumph, only weariness and complete liberation. She slowly, carefully, with pleasure, tore the sheet into tiny pieces and dropped them into the trash bin. Then she walked to the window. Outside, snow fell silently and thickly. It settled on the gray city, on the dirty sidewalks, on the bare branches of the trees, covering the ugliness with a white shroud. Snowflakes swirled in the lamplight, and it seemed as if it wasn't snow, but time itself, falling from the heavens, burying the past. Anna pressed her forehead against the cold glass, and for the first time in many years took a full, deep breath. The air was frosty, clean, and smelled of winter and nothing else,